Hello everybody, this is Graeme, and today I'm going to be looking at 3 small box games here. They're all games involving bluffing and lying. Or are they? Well, yes they are, but we'll get on to it. So the first one I'm going to be looking at is one called Kinapa. Now this is a family weight game that is a kind of a take on Go Fish, but with lying. Each round the Emperor will ask for a card, but in kind of reverse, kind of like who doesn't have a 7, raise your hand. But the Emperor may or may not actually get a 7. You know what? Let's get at the table to see how it's played. Here's Kinapa set up for 5 players. The goal of the game is to be the first player to play all of your cards. Players will have number cards, numbered 1 to the number of players times 2, so in this game we'll be playing with the number cards from 1 to 10, and the objective cards from 1 to 10. Shuffle the objective cards and lay them face down in a circle in the middle of the table. In the middle of this, place the Minister, which are the foxes, and the black sheep cards. Shuffle all the animal cards and deal 4 to each player. The player who receives the Maneki Neko card, which is the cat number 1 card, will be the first Emperor. The rounds will now start. At the start of a round, the player with the Emperor card says Kinapa A and then a number, then counts 1 to 3. So like Kinapa A7, 1, 2, 3. And on 3, all other players will either raise their hand or keep it down. Raising your hand means you do not have the card in your hand. Keeping your hand down says you may or may not have that card. If 2 or more people do not raise their hand, then the Emperor will take at random 1 card from one of those players that did not raise their hands, and the Emperor will give them a card in return. If 1 or no players raise their hand, then the Emperor must be given the card from whomever has it, and the Emperor will give them a card in return. If the card was in the possession of someone who raised their hand, the Emperor calls them a liar, and they are punished by being given the 2 fox cards. When you have the fox cards in front of you, you can no longer raise your hand and your cards are face up. At the end of each round, discard a fox card and you are the priority to receive the Emperor card at the end of the round. Any cards you receive while you do have the fox cards can be hidden. There is a special case for this. If the Emperor calls Kinapa on a pair of cards they already have and all players raise their hands, nothing happens. No cards are exchanged. If any player does not raise their hand in this situation, i.e. they're lying, then the Emperor shows their pair and exchanges a card with the player who did not raise their hand. At the end of a turn, the Emperor, and only the Emperor, turns over one of the objective cards for all to see. If the Emperor has the pair of cards that matches the objective cards, they play their 2 cards. If they are able to play it, then they must turn over another card to see if they can play another pair. If they at any time play a second pair, they have won the game. If they haven't won the game yet, then we go to the next round. If at least one person has raised their hand during the round, the Emperor will choose amongst those who did raise their hand and yet does not already have a sheep card. They will be the next Emperor and they will take a sheep card. If no one raised their hand, the Emperor does not change. And the first player to put down 2 pairs is the winner. Let's get back to see what I thought about Kinapa. Oh wow, do I dislike this game. First off, even the question itself, Kinapa A number, Kinapa A5, is confusing. Raise your hand if you did not have a 5, but keep it down if you want to bluff. Maybe. I found in a few games I did play this, most people were honest and just raised their hand when they didn't have it and kept it down when they did. Now, you could try and bluff, but I'm not exactly sure who you're trying to bluff. You're trying to bluff the Emperor, or maybe you're trying to bluff the other players. I'm not even sure whether bluff is the right word. It's just straight out lying. The Emperor will get a card, and the only choice you have is if 2 or more players keep their hands down, saying I may or may not have the card. Then the Emperor gets to choose a random card from one of them. So I'm not exactly sure what this bluffing comes into it actually. You want more people to keep their hands down if you don't have the card, but there's no real incentive for them to do it. If only one person keeps their hand down, the Emperor will get the card that they ask for. Maybe if you want to stop the Emperor from winning, you'll have a few people not raise their hand because then they may lose a card, but it may not be the one the Emperor actually needs. Honestly, I just don't get this. Now, it does get into the situation near the end of the game where there are a few people that have 2 cards left. And all players pretty much know what the other players have, as this is a closed economy. There's 2 cards of each number in play, spread amongst all the players. And honestly, this game is just not that interesting. This game is definitely not for me. I wasn't looking for a Go Fish with lying or bluffing, but unfortunately, that's what I got. I'm going to give this one a 3 out of 10. This is one I just did not have fun with. So the next game is Contraband Insider, where players take on the role of corrupt cops who are helping the underworld move their illicit goods. But you want the police to find the other players' illicit goods they have hidden in the city. Now each round, players are going to start off with a stack of cards and are going to hide their cards in either their home base or in the public locations. Then during the actual gameplay rounds, you're going to try and influence the active player into raiding spots where they think the other players have their contraband, all the while trying to keep their contraband safe. You know what? Let's get it to the table, see how it's played. Here's Contraband set up for 4 players. Shuffle all the assistance cards and draw 3 from the deck. All the tokens are placed underneath. Place the 8 public location cards on the table. Each player has a player card, 3 contraband cards, 6 unfound cards, 1 meeple, and 2 discs. Now the game is played over 3 rounds. Each round you'll try and hide your 3 contraband cards amongst the 8 public locations and your hideout. First, you shuffle all your goods cards together. Goods cards are your contraband cards and your unknown cards together. All players will simultaneously play a card from their goods deck face down onto their hideout. Then the players will take turns playing a card onto a public location. Once a card is played, no one can look at it, including yourself. Continue until all players have played all of their cards onto the public locations. Then we go to the police raid phase. Start with a start player, and they can do one of 3 actions. Raid a public location, raid a home base, or play an assistance card. Players will take turns doing one of these until there is only one unraided public location left. If the active player calls for an active raid, all other players, but not the active player, places a meeple on a public location. Then the active player has to pick one of these locations that has a meeple on it. They reveal and discard all the cards from that location, and everybody takes their meeples back. To raid a home base, the active player chooses another player and reveals their home base card. If it was a contraband card, the active player gets a police token worth 2 points at the end of the round, and the card is discarded. If it was an unfound card, the active player gets a police penalty token, which is worth -1 points at the end of the round, and the player whose card was turned over gets a police token, which is worth 2 points. The last action is to pick and play one of the assistance cards. You pick which of the 3 assistance cards you want to do, and do what it says. There are 3 types of cards: a discard after playing, discard after a condition on the card is met, and finally, this card which will stay for the entire round. Once there's only one unrated public location left, players will then go into scoring. For each of their contraband cards that has not been discarded, that is, they were in the last unrated public location, or their home base if it was not rated, will score points based on the number of cash icons on those contraband cards. Then you add any police tokens, subtract the police penalty tokens, and the players will place their score markers in the round section with the player with the highest points furthest to the left. Return all cards to their players, and pass the start token to the next player. In the final round, players will add up their score as normal for that round, and add in the number of stars they have received in previous rounds to get their final score. And the player with the highest final points is the winner. Let's get back to see what I thought about Contraband. Now I did just want to mention the theme in this one. The theme is definitely 14+, but there's nothing overly graphic on the cards. So just a word of caution there, the goods that you're dealing with, like the organs and the animals. Now this one is fun, if a bit shallow. Now you do have several bluffing opportunities throughout the game. Would I put my highest contraband card in my own hideout? Or hope that you would think I would put it in my hideout, so I'm maybe going to put one of my unfound cards to hopefully you'll guess my home base and I'll get one of those bonus tokens. And also putting your cards in the public locations. Do you go where other people have gone? Maybe try to read what the other players are doing and try and get your high card with their high card? Now, it does sound like there could be some strategy. I'm just not sure there actually really is. It just feels all like a random shot in the dark whether you're going to be able to hide your contraband or find someone else's contraband. Now, I really did like the public raid where the other players determined your options. Again, do you put your meeple where your cards are, or where you know your cards are not to try and double bluff, double think them? Again, not sure it ultimately matters because only one public space is left. And the assistance cards do seem a bit unbalanced. There are 1 or 2 that allow you to look in unrated public location decks, which gets that player definitely more information. And that's kind of one of my problems with this game. There's very few ways to get any information on the decks. Hopefully you remember where you put your cards, but you have no more information. Each decision seems to be a shot in the dark. I don't feel like I'm bluffing or trying to read the other players because I don't have anything to base that decision on. There's just not enough time in a round to try and figure out what the other players have done with their contraband cards. I don't have an opportunity to look at their cards or them to, make a guess. It's just sort of, the rounds are almost over too quickly. Now, there is a variant in this game box which I enjoyed. It's basically adds an extra role, a double agent, and they want all of their contraband cards to be found, and one player wants to try and catch that double agent, which I thought was interesting. Now, the double agent again changes from round to round as the variant cards are shuffled and dealt at the start of each round, so again, you don't get to build up information of what players are, or how they're playing. Now, I still enjoyed my plays of this one, but I can't see coming back to this on a regular basis, so I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. There is fun to be had. I just want a little more information to try and read the other players from my bluffing games. The last one is called Dying Message. There is a killer on the loose of a penthouse of a hotel, and it's up to your group to discover which one of you is the killer before all the innocent party goers are killed off. Now, I know this kind of sounds like a game called Werewolf. Basically, it's the same except for the theme, and it functions almost identical to Werewolf. Every day there's going to be a night phase where players are going to close their eyes. Killers are going to open up theirs and kill off one of the players. And during the day, all the alive players will discuss and vote to eliminate one of the players. So, just like Werewolf. But what this game does is it adds an element of Dixit to the game. You know what? Let's get it to the table and I'll show you how it's played.
Here's Dying Message set up. Randomly deal out 9 evidence cards, either side face up. Each player then receives a face down character card, which will tell them which side they're on, and if they have any special abilities. There is the killer team, which has the character cards with a red background, and the civilian team with blue background. The game is played over 2 phases and continues until all killers have been caught, or there are an equal number or more of killers than civilians left. The first phase is the night phase. Each player closes their eyes, and there's a script to go through depending on the character's abilities present, but at minimum, the killers will open up their eyes and flick the hand of another player. That player is now dead. They will open their eyes and see who killed them. They will then pick one of the evidence cards as the dying clue to help catch the killers. The killed player then closes their eyes, and the killers will pick 2 more evidence cards as decoys, and finally close their eyes. Then all players will open up their eyes. Now there should be 3 selected evidence cards and 6 unselected evidence cards. The alive players are then free to discuss what these clues mean. Players will then have a vote, count down from 3, and everyone will point at who they think a killer is. Players can decide to abstain from voting. The player with the majority of fingers pointing at them, and this has to be a majority, will then be given the opportunity to defend themselves. Then there is a second vote. If the same player is picked a second time in this round, they are eliminated. The eliminated player, if any, will reveal their card and activate any ability if they have one. If the eliminated player was a killer and there are no killers left, then the civilians have won. If the eliminated player was a civilian and there are now more or equal number of killers than civilians, then the killers have won. Otherwise, continue with the next round. Keep the 3 selected cards, discard the other 6, and deal 9 new cards. Now let's get back to see what I thought about Dying Message.
So, I do have a minor complaint about the components, and that's the size of this box. This box is way too big for the style of game. Here's my copy of Werewolf, which is basically a very much like it. I can easily fit my box of Werewolf into the box of Dying Light with no problem. There's just so much space in here for so few components. Another little minor thing I have is the rules are not as clear as they should be. Often you're kind of left to interpret it what makes the most sense. And if you're a seasoned Werewolf player, you'll kind of get the gist. For the gameplay, I like what this game was trying to do. One of the complaints in Werewolf was that when a player is eliminated, there's not much for them to do for the rest of the game. This tries to remedy that through, these evidence cards. And you know what? It works pretty well. And when the players are depleting who they think the killer is, you actually have something to go on, not just kind of random guesses, especially early on in the game. I also like that the previous messages are kept so you can try and work out the theme of this message and who they all point to. Now, of course, this all depends on there being something useful in these cards on the table to help identify the killer or killers. And I also like that the killers get to kind of mess with those messages as well. The base hidden role game, though, is pretty basic. I'm used to having a bunch of really interesting roles to play in Werewolf, while the ones in this game are maybe not as well thought out. I do like that some of the roles have to do with the evidence cards, but the actual roles and kind of their special abilities are actually kind of a letdown. So I'm going to give this one a 6.5 out of 10. And if the roles were more interesting, it would definitely be higher. I'd almost kind of wish that they could take these evidence cards and mash them with my copy of Werewolf. I think that might be an actual game again, you'd have to adjust the rules in here to kind of work with these as well, but I think that would be the best opportunity. So that is all 3 games. There's one that I really didn't like, but the other 2 are probably worth a look. And that's it for the moment. Until next time, thanks for watching.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching another video on the Dice Tower. Hey, do you want to know what's going on with Dice Tower? Do you want to know about our events, our cruises, special things that we're going to do live here in the Dice Tower? Subscribe to Dice Tower Digest. Go to dicetowerdigest.com. It's a newsletter that we send out bi-weekly. We won't use your email for anything else. This is just to get you some information about the Dice Tower so you'll be up to date. Thanks for watching.